Okay, greetings and welcome to the Galleys Pan-African Community News Update. Today's date is the 25th of February 2024, and I'm Brother Dr. Toyin Agbetu in the studio with Sister Oleander. Sister Oleander, are you there? Can you hear us okay?
Greetings, everybody. How's everybody doing this evening?
Yes, please let us know. We should be live on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, so please, as ever, give us a comment. Let us know you can hear and see us okay. The program's broadcasting a little early today. I think we made that clear. We're going to do that last week. We've got a jam-packed show. We're going to try and wrap this up in an hour, though. I've got an engagement we can't miss. I'll explain more towards the end of the program if there's enough time. But please let us know that you can hear us okay, that you can interact. And of course, if you think that this is useful and it will be useful to other people, you're welcome to share it. You're welcome to subscribe, like, and all those other doodah things that help with the social media. But as usual, we're going to start with libations, and that's to those who have recently passed, and mention a few notable anniversaries. And the first libation is, well, they're all tragic in many ways, but this one is to a community member. Her name is the late elder Sister Shekina Shinidu. Now, she was passed away. She was residing in the Gambia since 2017 and was at the forefront of the African repatriation movement there. In fact, what she was doing, not only was she living there, but she was also using her skills as a lawyer to help many people who had ideas about, leaving Belly the Beast and actually setting home and, up home in the motherland. Sadly, we learned that she'd been missing for a while, and then her body was found in a well. Now, it has been reported that a suspect has been arrested for her murder. There are some details. I'm not going to share them all now. Our sister Shanika was a loving grandmother, sister, and daughter, and she's deeply missed. And yeah, there's not much more I can say. She made some contributions to some of the Ligali films back in the day when we started making documentaries. Yes, we remember. The next libation is to the Kenyan athlete and the coach who was with him, Jervis, I don't know if I pronounce this right, Hakizimana, who passed away in a road accident. Now, Kevin Kipton was a young 24-year-old who set a world record in Chicago last October. It was just his third marathon after running a world record for a debut in Valencia in December. He also ran the London Marathon course record in April 2023. Yeah, it was a road accident. Unfortunately, there's not much more I can say than that. But to lose such talent at such a young age in such a tragic way, it's a loss. We remember. The next libation is really an in memoriam, which is to the entrepreneur Jamal Edwards. Now, many of you will remember that Jamal passed away in 2022 after, much fame from founding SBTV station, which was an amazing channel which helped launch the career of many, many famous music artists. Now, the Jamal Edwards Self-Belief Trust was set up by his mother, Brenda Edwards. I think you see her on one of those chat shows in the morning, to help underrepresented young people access fulfilling careers. So she's really working to keep his legacy going on. She said at an event in his honor that Jamal was a pioneer, a disruptor, and a force for good that opened doors and brought hope to so many, which is undoubtedly true. And as you can see in the images, there were several musicians, actors, and community activists gathered at an event which took place in Notting Hill this week to mark the second anniversary of his passing. We remember. And I'm going to close this section with another in memoriam, and this is to a name that you probably hear me speak probably way too much, and that's the amazing El Hajj Malik El Shabazz, also known as Omawale Malcolm X. Now, my personal role model, in the sense that my journey as an activist is very much inspired by his life and his contributions to our struggle. Brother Omawale Malcolm X was assassinated in the New York ballroom on the 21st of February in 1965. It's around 60 years now, isn't it? Last year, we saw some attorneys representing his family presenting sworn statements and evidence from two men implicating the federal agencies and the New York Police Department in a conspiracy to kill Malcolm. Now, many of you will know he was a Pan-Africanist, a human rights leader, a father, but he was just a beautiful human being. We could spend a whole program talking about his contribution to our struggle, but perhaps given what's taking place in the Middle East right now, I don't really like that term Middle East, but that's what we use, the Middle East right now. I thought I'd quote something he said in 1964 when he was delivering a speech in Cairo. Malcolm's words were, "The problem that exists in Palestine is not a religious problem. It is a question of colonialism. It is a question of a people who have been deprived of their homeland." And I think those words are as poignant today as they were when he said them in 1964. We remember. Just as a reminder, you are watching Legality's Pan-African Community News Update. If you're watching live, you're welcome to interact with us through Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter. Please, don't be scared. You can tweet, you can send us a message. I'm in the studio with Sister Oleander, just to let us know that you're out there, that you can hear us okay, that you can see us okay. We are broadcasting a little earlier than usual for this particular week. And as ever, like I said, don't forget to subscribe, like, share if you find this broadcast useful. Each one, teach one is the way we like to say in our community. Now, the next section looks at domestic news affecting our community. We do a review of everything that's taken place over the last couple of weeks. And the first story is part libation. Unfortunately, it's still current news. It's the passing of 3 children who were found dead in Bristol, suffering from knife injuries. Muhammad Al-Fishbash, aged 10 months, alongside his 10-year-old brother Fares and the 7-year-old sister Jory. I don't know what else I can say, really. A 42-year-old woman has been arrested on suspicion of murder. We don't have much more facts other than the woman suspected of murdering 3 children in Bristol was said to be having a hard time with a newborn. I've also heard on one of the news reports that she had been visited by, I think it was social services. I think, just all you know, it's right. Well, it was social services or one of the agencies. So they're going to be looking in or reviewing kind of like what happened there. But what we know and what we can't change is the loss of life of those beautiful children who have now joined the ancestors. The next story, unfortunately, follows on in the same vein. And the picture you can see of Gilo Muiviza. He was a young 2-year-old who fell into the river in Leicester, the River Soar in Leicester. Now, the police are continuing to search the river, and they can't find him. We don't know what's happened. His father was taken to hospital after entering the water to try and rescue his son, but to no avail. The police have said they're going to, spare no resources, no nothing. I mean, so what's that phrase? They'll turn over every stone. I think, I don't like always using these terms to see if they can find him. It's not looking great, but we try to be hopeful. Gilo's mother has issued a statement which said that he was a cheeky, funny, friendly, smart, caring, and independent little boy. He never failed to make them laugh or to smile, and he loved a cuddle and some kisses. So we at Legality can only hope for the best outcome and pray that he is found safe. Okay, moving on, changing the theme a little. is a story about the UCU, which is the Union for Staff in Universities and Higher Education and Further Education Colleges. Now, a key UCU committee has announced a boycott of its further engagement with the union because it says that it's got concerns over the union's failure to tackle entrenched racism and systemic disrespect. Now, the committee is called the Black Members Standing Committee. The disrespect and racism is faced towards African members of staff. And they told the Times Higher Education report that there was a culture of fear within UCU offices, and discrimination against minority ethnic staff had shaken them and underscored the urgent need for change, which is why they're doing the boycott. In fact, one of the key concerns was alleged UCU censorship of their statement on the situation in Gaza. Now, many of you will know that the Academy is having a pretty bad time for those of us who are engaged in political work or decolonizing work or anything that moves the direction towards social justice or anti-racism. And it's quite sad to hear that UCU has kind of like failed to really work with the Black Members Standing Committee, the BMSC. Following on from problems in higher education, this is a story that we've spoken about in the past. This is of the decision of the University of Chichester to suspend recruitment on to the History of African Diaspora course last year in July, stating it was actually no longer economically viable. That was their excuse. Well, now what we have is students who were on the course are now going to sue the university over their decisions. Now, it's important to remember that Professor Hakeem Addy, who started the course way back in 2017, did so as a way of ensuring that more students of African heritage were able to train as historians and carry out that tradition. We're facing a deficit when it comes down to African people studying history, and he changed that with this course and his activities outside the university. Well, Professor Hakeem Addy lost his job shortly after the university suspended recruitment on that groundbreaking course. And now the law firm Lee Day, I think it's our sister Jacqueline McKenzie who's actually leading this, has now initiated legal action on behalf of the 14 students who were either studying on the course or conducting PhD research. And they're arguing that they suffered discrimination and a breach of contract because of the decision. It doesn't stop there. The Black Equity Organisation, BEO, has also started a crowdfunding campaign, and they're looking to raise £5,000 to support this effort. And so far, they've received, just short of around 2,000. I don't know if it's gone up. No, it's gone up, sorry, 2,000, 4,600. So I think they're close to getting that 5,000. But that's what they need, because they're going to try and go for a judicial review, which is to challenge the legality, the lawfulness of the decision. So that's two different legal actions, one from the students and one from Black Equity Organisation. I hope they both succeed and we get some justice. We get this course reinstated. It shouldn't all just be on the University of Chichester, actually. More universities need to be teaching about the history of Africa. And yeah, let me move on. Greetings, Sister Oleander.
Greetings. So we have a hello from London _Miss234.
Greetings, London Miss 234. Nice to have you with us. I think you're a newbie to our chat, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the program. And I'm going to move on to the next story, which it's again in the education sector, and this is again, what can I say? It's a university accused of fueling Afrophobic abuse of a rector, our sister Stella Maris, who condemned Israel's war in Gaza. That's her crime, right? She condemned the war. She used the term genocide. And what's happened is that the president of the university's African Caribbean Society has come out and written to members stating that the university's rector was, because she was African, was subjecting anything and everything she does to an unequal level of scrutiny and general animosity, something which most Africans are familiar. They explain that she faced a triple threat of Afrophobia, Islamophobia, and misogyny for empathizing with the plight of Palestinians, which we all know that the ICJ is investigating currently as a genocide. Now, Maris has explicitly denounced Hamas's actions in an email that she sent out, but they're saying that the university failed to mention the barrage of abuse and harassment that she received, and so she's been really not supported by the university enough. This is a common thread across the higher education sector, where we're finding scholars who have made their career talking about anti-racism and decolonizing are incredibly silent over the deaths of the Palestinians and the conflict, fearful of losing their livelihood while people are losing their lives. I know it's a difficult topic to talk about. I know, the threats are real, but this shouldn't be going on. Not if we're truly believe in the concept of academic freedom and freedom of speech. In fact, I put the image of Brazil's president, Lula da Silva, because he recently has stated that Israel is committing genocide against Palestinians, and he wrote that he would not give up his dignity for falsehoods. And that's, when he was asked to back down from his claims. And I just kind of wanted to highlight the fact that some of us seem able to be able to talk on these issues, if we are political actors, and others are not. And it's almost as if some people are looking to validate the Trump argument that those in politics have, they're exempt from the same laws that govern all of us. But I like the fact that, Brazil's president is coming out and making a statement. In fact, I'm not sure if it was Brazil, but I remember reading this afternoon that one nation has actually withdrawn and severed all ties with Israel until they stop their violent action in Gaza, where they are murdering tens of thousands of innocent people. Okay, moving on. Is this Oleander?
Yes. So London _ Miss 234 says she's changed her name from English Gal 234.
Thank you. Okay, that makes sense. I remember English Gal 234. Okay, so welcome, and I love the rebrand. London Miss. Now this story is, it's an announcement, I suppose. David Harewood has been named the new president, and Cynthia Erivo, the vice president of the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art. That's RADA, for those of you who don't know. Now, the honorary president and vice president role is both symbolic and ambassadorial. So they'll be expected to engage actively to support the school and its students and the wider RADA family. And they do that through making contributions in public domain and advocacy, and just raising awareness around acting issues. The previous president was actually Kenneth Branagh. What's interesting, however, is remembering that in 2020, RADA said that it had been responsible for maintaining structures that are systemically racist, and that RADA has been and currently is institutionally racist. So it recognized racism in its ranks. I know, due to having had sight of a report into RADA's practice right now, that racism is still present. In fact, some of the things that take place at RADA, and I'm talking about now, a report that's just published this year. I don't think it's in the public domain, but it's quite explosive. It's well put together. Explores some of the conditions that African students have to face at RADA, which I don't know if the mainstream media will pick up on it, but it needs systemic change. And perhaps having David Harwood and Cynthia Erivo, and they're both being of African heritage, they can be ambassadors to actually finally, once and for all, eradicate those institutionally racist practices and policies that exist within that institution. We'll keep our eye on this story. The next story, I don't know where this goes. I mean, there's part of me that's, is it a celebratory story? Does it go in the positive news? And I think I've had to make a decision that no, it doesn't go in the positive news story. It goes in the news section, because there's quite a lot of politics behind this. So some of you would have heard that there's a new Windrush line which has been launched, but people are rightly criticizing it, saying that 50 people died waiting for their claims to be processed. So this line doesn't do much to change that right now, just renaming the overground lines. And just for you, you're not sure, this is an initiative by the London Mayor Sadiq Khan, where what he's done, he's taken the overground tube line and split it up and renamed different sections to honour and celebrate what he refers to as different parts of London's unique local history and culture. Now, the idea is actually a very noble idea in many ways. So the newly renamed lines include Lioness, I think that's the football team, Mildmay, that's linked to works in Newington Green, and Liberty, and Windrush. Now, the reason why, in some ways this is a good thing, because if I focus on Windrush, and that's the one that's getting the most media focus, the Windrush line runs from areas with strong ties to people with African Caribbean heritage, such as Dalston, Peckham, West Croydon, and so that's kind of like the idea between that line being labelled, and it's not just Sadiq Khan's idea. The campaign group Clapham Transport Users have been lobbying for the line for a while, and so what it happens now is that having a Windrush line also joins the UK's national annual Windrush Day, which ironically was introduced by Theresa May, who, as the Home Secretary, actually oversaw the introduction of the hostile environment policy. So I mean, there's a lot of politics going on there. Is it good that an effort to represent and actually to enshrine the identity of African people in London has been made? Well, of course it is. I think the challenge for many of us who are aware of history is it the right name? And that's where the problem comes from, because you see, of course, the name Windrush, it's got nothing to do with African people. And I'll explain that in another story in a few minutes. It has nothing to do with African people. In fact, the Windrush is actually, I think its full name was HMT Empire Windrush. So what we have is a line in London being named not after a group of African people, but being named after a ship, a colonial ship, which glorifies empire. Of course, we hear Windrush, and because of the way the media works, we tend to think of Africans with Caribbean heritage, but we tend to, even that is very limited. This kind of approach is not the first time we've had to deal with this question. When I heard this story, the first thing that came to mind was, and you can see the image on the screen, is the picture with Sadiq Khan saying that he was going to do something similar for the Latimer Road station after the Grenfell massacre. And so there was a call to change the name of Latimer Road to Grenfell. And everyone's like, yeah, it's a great idea, great idea. And because I wasn't part of that community, but I was supporting the community, I was in touch with many of the residents who were affected by the massacre. I kind of, behind closed doors, have a few words and said, look, it's up to you how you commemorate and remember your grief. But I just want to explain to you that the name Grenfell actually comes from the name Francis Wallace Grenfell. And that was in fact, I don't even want to give you all the details. Francis Wallace Grenfell was not a nice person. If you want to find out more, do a little bit of history and find out, what he did in Africa, find out what he did for the British, why was he given, and why was there a street named after him, and a station and a tower block named after him. So not a station, a tower block. So for me, sometimes, we jump to get these names kind of like put in the public domain without actually understanding kind of like what those names represent, what those symbols represent. Thankfully, with Grenfell, they kind of like, they pull back on it. and hopefully something meaningful will come out of the remains of the building. But this is the same thing with the Windrush line is done. It's a done deal now. So the line's called Windrush. So it's just another Empire Windrush icon in the public domain. And it might have had good intentions, but it has the same problem of reinscribing white supremacy. So again, these are politics. Like I said, it's good news on one level because the intention was positive, but the end, at the end of the day, it's a negative because 100 years from now, people won't even associate with African people. It will just be another monument to the Empire Windrush. I'm going to move on to another story. Was that Sister Oleander? I thought I just saw you there.
We have a message from N. Grand Rising, Brother Dr. Toyin. Always enjoy your insightful broadcast.
Grand Rising, and thank you. It's good to have you here as well. I know we're running a little early, but it's good to have feedback to know that you're with us. We're not just broadcasting that to the ether. So this particular story, it comes after the legendary artist Eddie Grant, who's now an elder, actually, 75 years of age, says that we are not Windrushes. And he talks about how the British government treated us like enslaved Africans. Now, he's really brought fire into this debate. Now, he wasn't, he's just talking in general about the term Windrush. And he said that, look, it's up to the British monarch now to begin the reparations process for the UK's role in Ma'afa. It's just taking too long. Our elder, who was born in Guyana and came to London in the 1960s, aged 12, branded the term Windrush generation a load of, and I'll say the word, bollocks. He said it's a load of bollocks. It's a phrase coined by the media. And he said that he was basically frustrated by the fact, and I'm going to quote him here, the fact that Caribbean people who are basically Africans in this particular case are labeled with a misnomer. We've accepted again by force of media a name or designation that doesn't belong to us. So that's Eddie Grant's words, not my words. In fact, he's not 100% right. The only part he's slightly wrong is that it's, apparently it was the late Sam King who coined the term Windrush generation, even though our elder preferred the term Windrush pioneers, because that's what he would prefer to use. But sometimes he would say Windrush generation, Windrush pioneers. And so the government and the media ran with it and forced it down our throats. But everything I think that our elder Eddie Grant here is saying is spot on. When he continues, he says, we are not a generation of Windrushes. We are a set of people who, in the face of England's loss of youth during the wars, had to be brought in on a very similar basis in terms as the enslaved Africans the first time round, who were taken to their imperial territories. Now, it's important to remember that this doesn't come out of nowhere, right? Eddie Grant has spent a musical, his musical career, his whole life, well, not his whole life, but at least 6 decades, calling for justice through his music. Many of you will probably remember, was it the South African Bring Me Hope, Joanne, I think it was. But he also had his album in 2006 called Reparation, which he also refers, to the call for justice. So this is not just him kind of like jumping on a bandwagon. He's got form. He understands this issue, and it's really important. Okay, so again, you are watching Legali's Pan-African Community News Update. Just to let you know, if you're watching live, you're welcome to interact with us like some of your other peers have. You can do that through Facebook, through YouTube, or Twitter. Don't forget to subscribe if you're new. You can like, and definitely you can share this with others who you think might find the broadcast useful. Now, this section is the one where you kind of like had to hold it down a little bit. It's a review of Afrophobia and related white supremacy news from around the UK. We only cover stories of incidents that have taken place over the last couple of weeks, and we limit it to UK because whilst the program would run for a whole year, there's that many stories that go on in the UK. So we cover things that are international, but with relevance to us if it helps us. So I'm going to move to the first story, and that's what I call the Oyinbo debate. Now, you might have known that in the UK right now, we have the most diverse parliament in British history. When I say diverse, I'm talking about ethnically diverse, but we also have the most racist and right-wing government. Not the most, because of course those who were in power during the times of enslavement and colonialism throughout Arthur were probably the most racist. But this new cohort are equally dense, equally immoral, and like I said, this cohort is actually ethnically diverse. And one of the stars of this cohort is Kemi Badenoch, who, they shuffle roles. I can't remember what. I think she's business secretary this week. They shuffle from role to role. She was the head of equalities and gender rights or something, and now she's head of business because, of course, they have skills and everything. They're omnipotent with their knowledge. But she's playing to become a Tory leader. So she's doing the media circuit. And so she recently did an interview. And the reason why I ask, is she the new Lola Ayonrinde, is because some of you will remember our sister, another Conservative MP, who really liked to stoke divisions between Africans from the continent and those with direct Caribbean heritage. It was an ugly thing she used to do. Her and Diane Abbott used to go at it on national television, and both of them actually didn't always show themselves in glory. But it was something that was really, unhelpful for our struggle. And so Kemi's doing the same now. So she's talking about Oyinbo, not understanding what the term really means, and it's quite embarrassing because she speaks better Yoruba than I do. But unfortunately, she's been anglicized to such a level, and her political ideology is such that she renders anything that is emic in her new white supremacist etiquette counts. So this interview, she made some comments, and the ones that I'm going to highlight, in fact, there's only one I'm going to highlight because it really irritated me, actually. There's a lot of it, and I don't want to repeat it, but she did speak about empire. And just like Tony Sewell did in the Creed report, that's the Commission for Racial Inequalities, blah, blah, blah. I can't remember what it was, a load of nonsense. She wrote on empire, yes, there was a period of colonialism in Africa, she's referring, and she says, some people came and they did some things and then they left. That's how she refers to colonialism. She's very glib over the history of enslavement, of African enslavement. She, that's like, it's nothing to do with me. I'm not interested in that. But colonialism, yeah, there's a little bit of colonialism. Some people came, they did some stuff, and then they left. It's a very disrespectful, very reductive rendition from someone who used to be head of equalities. And it kind of shows you where she thinks. I mean, she, even in this article, she quotes the Polish-Nigerian scholar Remi Adekoya, and he's another conservative political lecturer at the University of York, and he opposes anti-racism and claims that children raised in families where misfortunes are blamed on racism. And he says that they tend to always see discrimination everywhere. So he's saying it's not real. He's saying that, it's like there's a culture of blaming the system. They both deny that there's a hierarchy of racism as proposed by people like myself, Diane Abbott, the thing that made her lost her whip, and obviously more recently, Sadiq Khan, who was at the ugly end of Lee Anderson's rant, and what's the batshit one? What's her name? Sorry, excuse the language. Liz Truss, and was it Dowden? I think it was Dowden. It was Dowden, one of the two in Parliament, talking about Islamists taking over the UK. Now, Lee's lost the whip because he's expendable as far as they're concerned. They haven't said that he was racist. They're still trying to skirt around that. But Khan, actually, which I found very fascinating, actually, Khan was on BBC London, did circles talking about this hierarchy of racism, right? And hierarchy of racism is the very same thing that I said, and people came for me, and he didn't support me at all when I said it. But now he's saying it because it's referring to Islamophobia. So he's right, just like I was right. It's just interesting how they don't support you until it's personal. And what's her name? Wasi. She's the Conservative peer, I think. And she has actually got more fire on this topic than the Labour Party. It's quite embarrassing, actually, because I don't really agree with her politics. I'm not a conservative, but actually, I do admire her courage for standing up against Islamophobia in the Conservative Party consistently and taking sacrifices. You know, even if we disagree with her politics, she's doing the right thing. So these people are actually, you know, showing up, the likes of Kemi Badenoch, Suella Braverman, the Liz Trusses, the Boris Johnsons, all of them who have formed for stoking Islamophobia. And you know, you'll probably remember, I don't know if you might not even know that a few days ago there was a Muslim family who had a brick and a severed pig's head thrown through their window. So the words that come from politicians, when it comes right at the top, sanctions the violence that comes from the bottom. And that's what we've got to be really careful about. Every time you hear this dog whistle, you know, things like flight to Rwanda and stuff, it emboldens the racism. And of course, the majority of British people aren't racist, but it emboldens that fringe who are disgruntled and, you know, and see anyone that's different as the threat because that's what they're continuously told. So that's what I'm going to say about Kemi Badenoch. You know, is she the new Lola Ayurinde? I suppose if I was to say, is she a coconut, then I'd be called out for being. I remember, I think it was the Sun that said I'm an anti-black racist or some stupid phrase like this, right? So I'll leave it there. You read the interview if you can. You know, it's behind a paywall, but you can probably find it elsewhere. It's a horrible interview, horrible piece of work, and you know, and it really is a, you know, kind of like is a what's that word? Symptomatic, not symptomatic. I'm losing it now. It's a good example of the toxic politics that's taking place in British politics right now. And let me move on. Sister Oleander.
Yeah, so N has stated Sadiq Khan, the dirty hypocrite.
Oh, you know, I mean, what can I say? I mean, I'm too biased to comment on that. You know, he's the one who put the Windrush line, so he's trying to do some good works. But on this particular issue about hierarchy of racism, I think it is hypocritical to pretend that that someone who says that Africans are placed at the bottom of the hierarchy and then to condemn me or to not support me when others are coming for me, and then now to be saying the same thing just because you are affected as a Muslim by the same kind of approach. It doesn't, you know, moral cowardice kind of like comes to mind. But I'm going to move on. So the next story. Yeah. Well, you can see the image. I apologize for the image of the skull. I wish I could say that it was actually a replica skull, but unfortunately, I don't normally show the skulls of human beings because it's disrespectful. But this story is about a museum in Philadelphia that had the remains of 19 unknown Africans. And the Penn Museum, which is where they're held, have finally laid them to rest. That's really important to understand the background of this because they were part of the Samuel Morton cranial collection, which was named after a white supremacist in the 1800s who falsely tried to prove that European brains were superior to other ethnic groups. And he did that by measuring. You can see the image I put up there of the cranial monitor or some nonsense like this. You know, he amassed over 1,000 skulls. He was obsessed. And he measured them, compared them, and it's a size. He was obsessed with size, showing intelligence and stuff. It's just a ridiculous kind of like theory. It was the precursor to what became eugenics. But they held on to those skulls. I mean, I've got images of rows and rows of human skulls preserved in this museum, and I just didn't want to share them. It just creeped me out. And there's lots of museums that have such artifacts of human remains. Now in America, they have the NAGRA. Is it NAGRA? Yeah, they had the NAGRA policy, which was a law made to protect the rights and the dignity of Amerindian people. And so some museums, all museums are supposed to abide by it, but some take a bit of time. And what this NAGRA does, it means that museums are no longer allowed to hold on to human remains But of course, those that inherited them from old collections, like the Penn Museum, have, finally at least taken time to actually do the right thing and, where possible, return the remains to their ancestral lands or to give them a decent burial. So what they did in Philadelphia, there was a day-long event which honored their lives through songs, performances, speeches, and even though their identities for the most part are unknown, hopefully their spirit can rest a little easier as they traverse the ancestral realm. I can't even believe I'm sharing this news. These kind of barbaric things are still going on. Okay, sticking on the theme of museums, this one's slightly different because this is about Westminster Abbey, and they've actually decided that an Ethiopian tablet, which has been sealed inside an altar in the Abbey, should actually be returned to its home country, that's Ethiopia. And this is actually setting in motion the ideas of restitution of the sacred object. And this is a really important story in many ways because Westminster Abbey's tablet was, it's called a tablet for those of you who don't know. It was looted by British troops at the Battle of Magdala. I think it was previously called Magdala in 1868. That so-called Enlightenment time, whenever you hit 1800, you know it's going to be bad news. That was the so-called Enlightenment time when they're enslaving us and raping and all that kinds of stuff going on. So this tablet, or antiquity, is a tablet that symbolically represents the Ark of the Covenant and the Ten Commandments. I think it's kind of like what was symbolized inside the Raise the Lost Ark, that last scene. I'm not 100% sure. I'm not a theologian. I think that's what it is. But it's a sacred object. Now, what's happening is that there are discussions going between the Dean at Westminster and the head of the Ethiopian Church over the possible restitution of this sacred object, which is fantastic. The only trick, however, is that because the Westminster Abbey is what's known as a royal peculiar, it's directly under the monarch's jurisdiction. So that means that returning the tablet is likely to require the blessing of Charles, the British monarch, because he is ultimately the supreme governor of the Church of England. Now, let's hope this does happen, because if the Abbey does return it, and they obviously should do, this will put immense pressure on the British Museum, which holds 11 tablets, and they will have to reconsider their position. Whether they'll do it is another story, but at least it puts pressure on them. In the British Museum, the situation is even worse. They're actually kept in an underground store that not even the museum staff can enter. So those of you who've seen my film, The Walk, you'll know I make a comment, and then there's a point that we have that actually some of the artifacts that the museums hold are deeply spiritual artifacts. They are, and we need them. They're involved in ritual, and some of them have to degrade. Some of them have to go back to the soul. They have to be destroyed, believe it or not. Some of them, that's how objects normally go. So some of them will go into museums back at home. Some of them will become used in rituals, and some of them will degrade and they'll have a natural death, as they would do. But they're not supposed to be preserved in a vault in the British Museum for antiquity, for them to hold on to its spiritual power. That's problematic. But that's another program, which I'm probably not qualified to talk on. That's a very spiritual issue for another day. Okay, last story on white supremacy. This is a low-grade one. This is a return to a story that you might remember. It's this woman, Janice Wilding, who started screaming racist abuse at an African woman on the train. And, where the F do you come from? Go back to Africa. You don't belong here. All that sort of stuff. Well, she's on trial for this racist abuse. We've heard, or the court's heard, how when the woman tried to move away, this woman, Wilding, lunged at him and threw a punch but missed. Another passenger intervened and blocked the route, but Wilding kept on trying to hit her while screaming more abuse. So she was identified and arrested. As you know, she's actually charged for racially aggravated fear of violence by words. I've not really come across that framing before. Racially aggravated fear of violence by words. Very interesting. She pleaded guilty last year in December, and her defense has said that she's generally remorseful and wanted to apologize to the victim, which is rightly so. What's interesting, however, which you can probably catch from the headline, is that it's been claimed that her outburst may have been due to a combination of medication and alcohol. This whole idea of her drink being spiked. I'm a bit suspect about that one. Although, and you'll think, Toyin, you're being too soft when I say the next thing, it says that she actually did use antipsychotics. And so it's a combination of those things about antipsychotics. And if she's using antipsychotics, then it is possible, in my mind, that she was already, I'm not saying it didn't bring out something that was already there, but I'm saying that she already was in a troubled place in the first place if she's drinking extreme amounts of alcohol. I'm not excusing her. I just didn't know about the antipsychotics. Sister Oleander.
Well,
you're going to slap me for this.
There is no excuse. I don't business, no
No,
matter how hard or bad a day I might be having, for me to be somewhere and start abusing someone, because that's what this is. She's abusing this sister. It could have been anyone. It could have been an old lady, an old European lady. It doesn't matter who it is. But the fact of the matter is, this came out of her mouth. And just like whenever someone drinks too much and people say, oh, it's the drink talking. No, it's not the drink talking. It's them talking. That's how they genuinely feel. That's how they genuinely are. So I don't business. She now get no excuse from me. As far as I'm concerned, that is she, and that is her true feelings. She's just trying to find a way to get out of it. That's all. She's trying to get people to feel sorry for her. That's all me I say. Anyway. But just a reminder of the time as well, just for your knowledge.
Oh, yes. Give thanks. Okay. Yes. We'll move on from the story. Sister Oleander has spoken, and those are words of wisdom. The alcohol, the medication can't make you say something that wasn't there in the first place. It just reduces your inhibitions. And so those things were there. I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to move faster. Okay, next story. Actually, not next story, next section. Remember, you're watching Legali's Pan-African Community News Update, blah, blah, blah. If you're live, interact with us. It's been great having you, talking, letting us know you can hear and say it's okay. But don't be shy. Don't forget to subscribe, like, share it around as well. I'm going to try and wrap this up in the next 10 minutes. So it's going to be quite a charge to the end. Now, this next section looks at some policing-related issues affecting our community around the UK. So please, 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 if you want to interact, start thinking about what you want to say now, ask questions, make points, and we'll try and share that as well, because we're going to try and wrap up on time. So the first story is it's a good story. It's a good news story. This is about the gang matrix, being abolished. And I say abolished because that might remind you, what happened with the shift from slavery to colonization. It means it's abolished, but it's not gone. So the gang matrix, for those who don't know, held the details of several thousand young people suspected of links to criminal groups. Many of them were classified and racialized as Black. Now, Scotland Yard, the Metropolitan Police, has said that the database is going to be replaced with a new, and I think they've got a flash name for it, the Violent Harm Assessment Target, database. And it's going to be targeting the most violent people in each part of London. So it's not the gangs matrix anymore. It's the Violent Harm Assessment Database now. I think they're just going to rename the matrix data. No, that's not fair. I shouldn't say that. They are going to, if you ask to be removed, they're going to purge it. They say they're going to delete the database. Of course, they're not going to delete the database, but they claim they're going to create a new database. What I just want to remind you is that it took years to get to this stage, and big up people like Stafford Scott and those who led legal actions against the Metropolitan Police to get to the stage. But it took years. In fact, you might remember that it was 2018 that there was a report from the Information Commissioner's Office that said that actually you're holding people disproportionately in a way that is racially biased, and you had to get rid of it. And that was like, 6 years ago. So again, when I say this reminds me of the shift from slavery to colonialism, I'm not saying that without basis, okay? It's good that the gang matrix database is going to be destroyed, but this violent harms assessment database, we need to keep our eye on that. We need to see what's going on. Let me move on quickly. Sister Oleander.
Yeah, just very quickly, Mr. I33 Black Reparation Nation sends greetings.
Greetings to you as well, brother. Greetings as well. Okay, so the next story is related, and this is something that Legali is actually looking to be involved in. Now, I shared on YouTube yesterday a video with some concerns we have over this new form of digital scan and search. I'm calling it scan and search, DSS, because it's becoming more frequent. And the story I shared was the use of it in Croydon, where the van came up, started scanning people walking down the street, and they arrested like 7 people. They said there was no false positives. I think there was a twin. Apart from there was somebody who was a twin. That's the only person they picked up, which was a false positive, and we can understand that one there. And they had a sister alongside them saying that, well, I had a few concerns, but if it gets denied off the street, now this is really worrying me, because scan and search for me is like the next form of stop and search. Before we used to say, do you remember SUS? Searching without suspicion. This whole idea, and we had an uprising over this, right? So scan and search is the same thing as far as I see it. You're scanning someone without suspicion, and it's what I call a speculative search. You're hoping to find something. So if you're hoping to find something against someone who's racialized in some way, someone from a marginalized community, then what happens is that you're not walking in a public space with a level of freedom. You're walking in constant scrutiny, constantly violation. We're not even consenting to these searches. Our identity, our history, even those people who are former offenders who have served their time and trying to move forward, trying to rehabilitate themselves, to reintegrate into society, they come under suspicion. So we're not really having a discussion around digital scan and search. What's happening, we're just hearing about live facial recognition being used to target people who are disruptive, because they're using it against protesters, and it's bugging me. And I'm going to do some research on this. It's really bugging me. But I say all this, it's important to know that currently the Metropolitan Police is actually asking Londoners through the survey what they think about stop and search practice. And if you read some of the questions inside there, it's chilling. There are things in there like, I think it's on the screen. You can't see because it's so small. In fact, let me make it a bit bigger. There's stuff on there about, are you happy for AI software to review the body-worn video that the police officers have, and then flag up if something's inappropriate? Are you happy for that to be automated, those kind of processes? And them kind of things worry me, right? Because it's never okay for it to be done by a machine. To sort things out and to prioritize things, maybe, who knows, whatever. But it has to be a human that looks at it. It can't even be random sampling. But did you hear about this survey that's going around, trying to build confidence in our community? Because a project's being led by the Deputy Assistant Commissioner, Ade Adelekan. You might have seen him on the news quite a lot. He's the brother who's going around, and police put him up front whenever it's something to do with racism. And he's saying that a key part of our plan is to reform the Met and make sure it can work closely with communities, ensuring we police with their consent. Well, they're not policing with our consent. And if you haven't seen that survey, then ask yourself, why haven't you seen the survey? It's online. If you go to smartsurvey.co.uk and type in London Metropolitan Police Survey, stop and search, it should come up. That's how I found it. But keep an eye out for this digital scan and search. You might hear it under the word LFR, live facial recognition, where it takes your biometric data and it compares you to databases around, national databases, criminal databases, to see who you are. No good's going to come from this. No good unless we do something about making sure there are safeguards. Let me move on. Sister Oleander?
Yep. So we have a comment. Nebma Lamin Sham. Do you think we need to abandon putting spiritual beliefs into artifacts that the white extremists steal and control?
Oh, that's a very good question. That's a tricky one. It's an excellent one. I don't think we can. I think there's 2 aspects when it comes to rituals. There's various perspectives, but there's 2 that comes to mind when it comes to those artifacts. Some of those artifacts literally are, the sweat and blood of our ancestors. So just being near them, being around them, gives strength, give courage, give hope. And so the artifacts, if you think like the Festac mask and what it represents, it unifies us. If you kind of think about the European equivalent, like the sword and the stone, the King Arthur legend and stuff like that, sometimes that's what happens. But on the other side, which is the point you allude to, which is very important, is the argument which also many African communities hold. In Europe, you'll hear us say Ashe, Ashe, or you'll hear this term. Ashe really just talks about the universal energy around us. Make it so. It's kind of like when people, if you think about Star Wars, they kind of like plagiarize it. That whole idea, may the force be with you. That's Ashe. That's what they're talking about. When they say the force is everywhere, it's amongst us. So when Yoruba say Ashe, they're saying make it be, make it so, make it happen, bring the universal energy. And what that recognizes is that those spiritual energies reside within each and every single one of us. And so that's that. You're right. We can, kind of like still engage in spiritual practices without those artifacts, but it would be wrong to suggest that they're not like magnifiers. They're not like like really key focal points for us to come together and to reach even wider, to become even stronger. So it's a very good question, and I hope you can make it to that open classroom, because those are kind of anthropological questions that I'd love to discuss. But thank you for that. Okay, just because of time, I'm going to keep moving on to the next slide. The next section actually is health. Just as for those of you who are with us, this is, I think, we're, well, blah, 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 so I get it, get you say it straight. You're watching the Gaze Pan African Community News Update. I'm in the studio, Sister Oleander. If you're watching live, you can interact with us and ask those really thought-provoking questions and give advice as well. You can do it through Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter. You can also subscribe, like, share, if you find this broadcast useful. It's going to be recorded, so it goes up on YouTube, so you can share it afterwards, put it in your WhatsApps and stuff like that as well. Now, I'm going to go over some of the health-related stories relating to our community over the past 2 weeks. We are broadcasting a little earlier than usual because we have to wrap up very, very sharply. So I'm going to move through them quite quickly if I can. So this is a story about the hostile environment, or people call the Windrush scandal, and some new report that's come out that says it's actually harmed the mental health of African Caribbean people. And I say specifically Africans with Caribbean heritage because that's what this paper did the research about. And what it found was that Africans with Caribbean heritage had worse mental health relative to people from European backgrounds after the implementation of the Immigration Act 2014 and the resulting Windrush scandal, where we saw the media coverage in 2017. And that's because they were particularly targeted, right? Those of us with Caribbean heritage, those of us who had that. I mean, it's not completely accurate in the sense because my father comes from Nigeria, part of the Commonwealth, and he would have been affected had he still been alive. So there are many people who didn't come through the Windrush route, who didn't come through the Caribbean. But generally, the media, and this is what's really a good point, which I think Dr. Annie Jeffrey, the paper's lead author, said, that when the Windrush scandal dominated the news, there may have been a risk of re-traumatization for some people, while even those who were not directly affected may have experienced a form of vicarious trauma or fear of what could also happen to them. And that's a really important part to make, right? So it's not just the people who were directly affected or whose boarding passes were destroyed by the government. It was also those who heard it and felt that they could have been a link towards them. So what happened is that their mental health was under attack, and there was a degradation that they felt. And the end result of this paper is really just saying that, look, in future, any new policies such as this, there must be impact assessments to make sure that that the body's making it look at the mental health situation of people from minority ethnic communities, and they should also be embedded in policy making. You don't make these policies without considering mental health. This government's talked a lot about wanting to put millions into mental health, and all they do is gaslight everyone and cause more mental health stress, more strife, more trauma for people. The Windrush scandal, which some people rightly call the Home Office scandal, was so traumatizing. And now that they're talking about the Horizon scandal, which is the Post Office scandal, which again is another Home Office scandal, that's the real correct term for it. People are pushing the Windrush scandal to one side and acting as if it's over. We're dealing with it. Get over it. Move on. what I'm also going to add to this point, and you might see it in the other image on the slide, is that the latest government figures have also shown that there's a racial disparity in the use of force incidents, which has been, oops, I don't know what on earth happened there. That was interesting. Okay, we're back. Okay, so there's been an increase in racial disparity use of force incidents against African patients in England. And that's, African people of all backgrounds, not just Caribbean heritage, but all Africans. And this data covers the first full year since the main provisions of the Mental Health Units Act came into play in 2018. Now, that act, which is known as Shenny's Law, which you may remember was introduced following the death of Olashenny Lewis, who was killed in Bethlehem Royal Hospital at the age of 23 in 2010 after being restrained by 11, count that, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 police officers restrained him. So that act has come into play, but actually there's still an increase in the use of force against African people. Now, the provisions are supposed to require mental health care providers to develop and publish policies on the use of restraint, to keep records of the use of force, and to train staff in de-escalation techniques to help reduce this occurrence. But if you remember the killing of Rashan Charles, there was no de-escalation with the police. Of course, the police have now said they're not going to go to mental health incidents unless they're specifically asked for. But this is another area that we don't talk enough about. I'm going to move on. Sorry to rush through, right? It is an important topic, but I hope you can see the slides and read those articles and that paper. The next story is about UK's healthcare, and I would just blatantly call it an apartheid system, because across areas in England, you can see that where there's a high proportion of people from ethnic minority communities, they have the poorest level of access to their GPs. And the opposite is also true. In areas where there's less minority ethnic diversity, then they have a higher level of access to GPs. I could give you all the figures. It's not very difficult to find it. I think it's 37 GPs per 100,000 in high ethnic areas and 44 GPs per 100,000 in lower, but you can double check that. The bottom line here, really, I just want to remind you about, I mean, this is new research. I say new research, I want to talk about that in a second. I want to remind you that last year, that Rishi Sunak was exposed after he was caught on camera talking about siphoning off money from poor areas in the UK to the richer southeast of England. So he was deliberately saying areas where there was deprivation and they needed the money. He didn't use those words, but that's what he was saying. He's going to take that finance and move it to those rich areas and change the formulas. And this is when he was Chancellor, I think it was, before he became Prime Minister. So, be mindful that this is not just an accident. What's happening wherever we are, we have less access to doctors, where there's more of us. And that's being done, I would argue, quite deliberately. It's an apartheid system in the healthcare. It's nothing to do with the NHS. Everything to do with government funding. But the only reason why I say also, I want to say something about this, we are in an election cycle, and this research didn't come from an academic. It came from journalists at The Guardian. Now, The Guardian is an institution that does some good work. I mean, it has its problems. It can be Afrophobic in places and stuff. But what the media will be trying to do in this election cycle is to rile us up, is to get us angry, and try to guide us to vote for their preferred parties. So it won't just be The Guardian, it'll be The Times, it'll be The Mail, it'll be The Sun, it'll be The Daily Mirror. So when we hear these things, and we're going to hear a lot of these kind of stories, they're just trying to move us to vote the way that they want us to vote. It's the same thing like that clown, the orange one in the White House, running around telling African Americans, African Americans, vote for me because I know what it feels like to be oppressed as well, just like they're oppressed. These kind of foolishness, and some of us will fall for it. So just be mindful. Okay, Sister Oleander.
Yeah, I just wanted to say the orange one is not in the White House right now. I know
that's true. He's not, but he most likely will be.
But he's not there yet.
Okay. Yes, he's not in the White House. Formally in the White House, I should have said. Yes. So yes, Oh, this horrible story. Yes, African children suffer more complications after appendicitis surgery. Now, I mean, you probably won't be surprised by that, but what's new about this research and what's quite important about it is that they looked into the health history and the socio-economic status of those children, and they found that actually this racial disparity wasn't linked to that. And that's a really important finding because it says that actually something else is going on. It's got nothing to do with the fact that they're from poor families. It's got nothing to do with preconditions. And if we're eliminating those causes, because you'll always hear, oh, it's their classes, their cultures, they don't have food or blah 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 blah, the dietary stuff. If those things have been eliminated, well, then we are back to understanding that if there's a disparity between African and European children who are undertaking appendicitis operations, and it's quite significant that those who are African are having more post-operative complications within 30 days of surgery, then I think it's quite clear. I would say this, I would suggest that there's a very good case to argue that it's institutional racism, it's structural. So that's what this story says. I'm going to move on, but that's in a nutshell what this research is telling us.
So N just said it's predicted Trump will win.
It's possible. It is very possible. Yeah, let's move on. And thank you. I mean, I hope not, but actually, maybe what did Garvey say? Sometimes you don't know yourself until your back's against the wall. Who knows? If the idiots vote for the orange one again and he gets into the White House, then people will learn the hard way that actually America is a white supremacist nation and it hasn't changed, rather than pretending that it's this liberal democracy where it's still financing the war against Palestinians. Anyway, next story. Okay, so this one is, oh God, I just remember it just came back to me. This is the story about the woman the pregnant woman. And we know about maternity deaths. We know about the increase of deaths faced by African women in maternity. But here's a practical case and also the managing of the language afterwards. So what happened was that there was a sister. She was 31 years of age. And she passed away in, March last year. She was 18 months pregnant. She was taken to hospital in an ambulance. She was in acute pain, right? She was in serious pain. But the staff, they were like, oh, she's been really difficult, and they ignored her. They found this out because they looked at comments in the medical notes, and they just roughed her up, essentially, and she died. And what we now know is that actually they should have looked into it. They could have probably done something to save her life. And what the media did when it came out and talked about this story, they kept on using these stupid terms like cultural bias, delayed diagnosis, or ethnic bias, delayed diagnosis. And what was happening was Afrophobia. It was racism. I mean, I don't mind if you don't say Afrophobia. I mean, that's something, that's an education program. We had to learn about the same way that people use anti-Semitism or Islamophobia. We need to be specific and say Afrophobia. But I don't even care if you don't say that. If you're going to say, just say racism then, if you can't say Afrophobia. But they didn't do that, right? They kept on saying cultural bias or ethnic bias. They skirted around the issue as much. Now, to its credit, the hospital saw this and saw it was winding people up, and they've issued a statement about their commitment to being an anti-racist organization. And of course, there'll be changes and staff and statements and pledges and all these kinds of stuff there. But it's just an important topic to story to know, because this is still ongoing. This hasn't been solved. You've been hearing about maternity deaths faced by African women in the UK over and over and over again, and you need to understand how that manifests itself. It manifests itself as people seeing us and thinking that we are superhuman, and that when we're in pain, we're not really in pain. We're just being difficult. We're just being awkward, or or because we're smiling, or because we're nodding our head to music, we're using it to try and distract ourselves, that we don't need urgent attention. I haven't got time to run into the story in depth, but that's that story, and please check it out. All right, this is the last section, and we're going to whiz through them. This is Legali's Pan-African Community News Update. We're on live, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter. This is the last section, and then we're gone. We're out of here. So if you've got something to say, type it now, because literally I'm going to run. Okay, so the first story, which is a nice one, and they all are because they're positive. It's a positive section of the program. It's the story about a retirement home that hosts a surprise 112th birthday party for our elder, Mamma Mia de Silva. Now, our elder, who is affectionately known as Donna Dulu, has been at her retirement home for 27 years. She lives in Brazil, where she's been contributing continuously to the home's general services and helping other elderly folk living there. Now, she speaks to psychologists regularly, and one of the things that she says is that despite having no family, she has a tragic backstory. But despite that, and having no family around her, she has never lost her ability to smile and be happy, which she tells everybody is a secret of longevity. That's it. Learn to smile and be happy. It's not, I know it's not easy, and I know, but this is her giving us that advice. So when things get bad, where are we moving towards? We're moving towards happiness, to contentment, to being able to smile. So I just thought I'd share that. 112 years of age and still helping others. Another amazing birthday that's been made by our elder Ralph Otti, who was just 19 when he left Jamaica and came to the UK in 1944. He now lives in Lincolnshire, and he celebrated his 100th birthday surrounded by his family and friends. And he says that as well as nightly prayers, now his longevity was down to doing sit-ups for an hour every day, including on his birthday. Now, I ain't going to pick up my chest and say that I do sit-ups every day on my birthday. I might try and go for a walk or go for a cycle. But our elder is 100 years, and so we want to big him up. His history, maybe not as tragic as our mama. He originally came to the UK. He wanted to be a teacher, but instead became one of the more than 10,000 Africans enlisted to fight in the European Civil War against Hitler. So his dreams were cut short because he was, kind of like caught up in that madness. And so he never did become a teacher. I think he was an RAF fighter or something like that. But yes, I just thought I'd share that with you. The next news is this is the Black British Book Festival, which is a program that's been running and been organised by our sister Selena Brown. And she is now working with the London Book Fair, which is offering 20 African authors and booksellers a free ticket to the festival next month. I think that the festival is going to happen next month, but I think the deadline for asking for the tickets has expired. So I double need to check that. I should have put a date on here. But that's a positive story. And our sister has said that together with the London Book Fair, we are creating a platform that not only celebrates Black authors, but also actively promotes inclusivity within the literary world. And it's a really important statement because when I went onto the website for the London Book Fair, it was quite to say it lacked diversity is an understatement. So, I mean, those 20 people who win those tickets might be the only Africans in that space. So there's something to be said about increasing the ideas of diversity and promoting inclusivity in the London Book Fair. So thank you, Selena, for organising that. But I think the hard work needs to be done by the London Book Fair organisers. And it's more than just some tickets, complimentary tickets. Okay, this is a collective of stories, and I want to share this and just to give you some good ideas and good thoughts, having shared the news about our sister Shakina and her passing. This is a story about Jessica Washington, who now lives in a 6-bedroom house on a hill with avocado trees and a spectacular view not far from the rabbit farm that she now runs. For less than $50,000, there's also a husband and wife who have built a 4-bedroom, 2-bathroom house on family land there. Another couple now call themselves Islanders, and they're the owners of 3 homes called by ocean breezes. Now, these stories and these images that you see here, there's many more I found. They're all African Americans who found new homes in the motherland. And it's just a reminder that even though there has been a spate of deaths of African returnees, those of us in the diaspora returning home, and it doesn't, it happens whether we return back to Africa, whether we return back to the Caribbean. Those of us in the diaspora sometimes we're targeted. I'm not going to pretend that doesn't happen. We also have to remember success stories. We have to remember why. And in these particular cases, from Zanzibar, Ghana, Rwanda to Uganda, all of them are enjoying substantially lower cost of living. And more importantly, they said, the absence of racism that they experienced in the United States, where around 14% of the population is African. So that's one of the big benefits of going back and setting up home. And this is one of the things they did. And they are success stories. And the quality of life they're experiencing is through the roof. So even though we had to be real about the tragedy that can take place as well, we also had to be real about the possibilities of just being able to be in a space where we just are. We can just be. So I'm going to leave that there. But that's, I think it's a positive story. Here's an organization I've not heard of before, but clearly I think most of us will hear about them very soon. Nala's Baby, which was founded by the parents Sasha Elise Gilbert and Queso Crept Johnson. Now they've attracted famous new investors, including the boxer Anthony Joshua, the model and actress Jordan Dunn, British YouTuber Young Philly, and many, many more that I never even heard of before in my life because I'm too old. Now, the product which they've designed is dedicated to providing natural, clean, and trusted skin and healthcare, hair care for the whole family. And it's available in Tesco, I think Morrison's, Ocado, and I think it's just good that some of our, I don't like using that term, celebrities, our so-called media personalities, or some of them are actually getting in and supporting and putting their money where their mouth is. We need that. So I thought I'd share. I don't do adverts on this program, but it's good. The link between entrepreneurs in our community, getting support from those who have the money in the profile, is always a good thing. We need to do it more often. Just an event that's taken up, that's coming up, I should say. Many of you who've long-time Nageli supporters and aware will know about the history of the New Cross Massacre. There's going to be a tribute on the 2nd of March, 12 noon at Hackney Downs Park. It's going to follow up the actions of the late Charles Collin, who 27 years ago planted 14 trees as a tribute to the young people who lost their lives in 1981. I talked about the uprising with SUS. I talked about that era. The New Cross Massacre, I can't explain that today right now, but there's a group calling itself the OGYG, which is older generation, the younger generation, and they've come together in this beautiful way, and they're working with other people to preserve this history. So I'm hoping that the trees are, maybe starting to grow or something. There's going to be a plaque or something. I don't know what's going to take place, but that's a tribute. 2nd of March, 12 noon at Hackney Downs Park, and I love the idea that older generation, the younger generation coming together to work on history. I think the students at B6 are going to be involved as well. It's amazing for me, so I'm going to try and make sure I'm there. Sorry, is that Sister Oleander? Did you tap?
Yeah. So we have a few messages coming up actually. Black History Walks, some good stuff coming up. Black History Walk turned in GCSE exam textbook workshop this weekend at Pearson Education HQ.
Excellent.
And there's a website that's in the chat. And then Nebar Lamin Sham says, rest in power, my beautiful sister Shakina Shinedu, who was found dead and believed to be murdered here in the Gambia. Yeah, that's something that we covered at the beginning. Yeah, give thanks. And then Black History Walk says, and Africa Center hosts How Black People Won World War II 5-hour event.
Oh, that sounds big.
Yeah. And then Black History Walks also puts the website in there.
Give thanks. And thank you, Brother Tony, for sharing that information with us. Always doing some amazing work for our community. So this slide here is just a reminder, because you wouldn't have seen it on the news, that yesterday there was a huge protest about the genocide in Congo. Now there are more than 7 million internally displaced people in the DR Congo. There's been violence, mistreatment towards human beings. And this has been co-signed essentially by the US, by the UK, by France, providing military aid to Uganda and Rwanda. Now, those two countries argue that they are not involved in the conflict. but a lot of people on the ground say that they are, and that the support of these Western nations, again, the US, the UK, and France, are aiding this genocide. Now, there was a protest in the House of Commons lobby, by extension, rebellion against this, which I don't think many people heard about. And yesterday there was a huge protest. You can go online and see some of the footage. I find it amazing that none of it was covered on the mainstream media. Absolutely none of it. If I hadn't stumbled across it on some Twitter post, and thank you those of you on Twitter who are sharing this, and that's where I got some of the images from. It's like it didn't happen. I mean, I remember going to one of these marches last year, but it's an ongoing situation. So I want to thank those online posters from who I got these images. It's also important to understand that police in the DR Congo have fired tear gas to disperse anti-Western demonstrations in Kinshasa, which is the capital, because the protesters are accusing the government of failing to use their influence over Rwanda and trying to curb the rebellion in the Congo. And Rwanda is accused of also backing the M23 rebel group, which, again, like I said, it denies. Now, angry protesters burnt the flags of the US or Belgium, which is the Congo's former colonizer. This is an ongoing situation. I don't have time to cover it, but again, the media whitewash of this is astounding and outrageous. And even now they're pushing the Palestinian, kind of like offensive against Palestinian. I should say, see, look at that. Even saying Palestinian, the genocide against Palestinian, even I hesitate. And I'm a man who don't hesitate to talk about these things. But I know that even saying that, I could just lose my job. It's ridiculous, right? That's kind of what they've got you doing. They're kind of putting these things in your head so you hesitate to talk the truth. And you must never hesitate to talk the truth. That's what's taking place. Anyway, let me keep moving on. Sister Oleander?
Yes. So we have N saying free the Congo.
Thank you. Yes. Okay. A walk in the belly of the beast. Pure serendipity. Our brother Tony already just joined us and shared some information about some of the events that are taking place, and you can find more information about that on the Black History Walks site. But I saw something that caught my eye, and it's this new walk that's been organised, which is what I call Walk in the Belly of the Beast. And if you want to understand how resistance and oppression is all over in place in the heart of the belly of the beast, then you should try and check out Black History Walks, on the 31st of March at 10 a.m. to 12 noon. That's on Sunday in a month's time. And this sounds like an amazing walk. I think I'm going to be going on the one about African freedom fighters, but you've got nothing ever to lose by checking out one of these events. I am rushing because we're late. I'm sorry about that. Okay, just as a closing reminder, we've got our biannual open classroom event. That's where nerds who like anthropology, who want to understand a little bit about the topic that I teach at UCL, are welcome to come to the IPAD Empowerment Centre, which is formerly the Levi building, which is on 18 to 24 Lower Clapton Road. All the details are there. You have to register, please. It's a classroom session, it's a lecture, it's a seminar. So we do some slides, we have discussions. It runs for 3 hours. It just calls upon us to rethink anthropology as a discipline. So also for anyone interested in experiential learning, participatory research, scholar activism, or wanting to start learning how to co-design and collaborate on ethnographic projects designed to address real world challenges like digital stop and search, things like that, anything like that. So you're welcome to come. Please register soon though. That's it. I think I'm out of here, Sister Oleander.
Yeah, so just really quickly, Black History Walks says, sorry, I've gone to the wrong one. People should also watch The Walk by Toyin Agbetu, 2007. He says it's an incredible Black British civil rights documentary on YouTube. It shows Trafalgar Square and the National Gallery, Charing Cross Police Station, and lots of good-looking Africans.
When we were all younger. Thank you. Oh, thank you. Where are we?
Oh, sorry.
Okay, look.
Uh,
I think we are there, which is the last
yes.
slide. Let me do that. There we
Yeah.
go. So we're gonna rush. I want to thank Brother Colin for our research, our community journalists. I say this because I take the news, I get it from everywhere. We get the research, and sometimes I forget. It was Melissa actually who did this on Twitter. I remember I saw her credit each of the journalists under an article that supported our community, and I thought that's such a good way to do things. And I just thought, yeah, our community journalists who are doing this work, they face a lot of attacks by covering these stories as well. And so we have to support them. We have to back them. So I want to thank them as well for doing this work. Of course, you Legali supporters, those of you who donate, those of you who don't, those of you who watch, those of you who share, just sharing is really important as well. Just taking a clip and sharing it out there so others, new people can actually hear about information. Each one teach one. I don't do any promotion. That's not that's not me. That's not my role. We put this together. So I want to thank them. But of course, I want to thank all of you for spending this time with us and giving us food for thought. That question about our spiritual energy is going to stay with me all today. Sister Oleander, is there any closing words you want to say before we run off?
Just the last comment was from Black Kids Matter UK. Yes, it's amazing, the walk. But apart from that, everybody walk good. So sorry, we do have to rush. Well, it's not even rush. It's been an hour and a half, really. But yeah, so we have to go. But do take care, everybody, and walk good.
Thank you. And what I'll say is we will be back on Sunday, the 10th of March, 2024, for the last program of the term at the usual time of 7 p.m. And I did say right at the beginning what happened. There's a amazing artist, Zoe, Tall Black Man, Deborah Bond. I love my neo soul. They're in the UK. You know what I mean? It's completely ram up. And one of the things that happened when I do this program is that we had tickets to see Kindred, and we was doing a program and we went over, and so we couldn't go to see Kindred. We lost it. Kindred, the family soul, for those of you who know music and stuff like that. And we keep doing that. We keep missing the time just to have that spiritual time to heal. So we need to get to Camden in like yesterday before we're not allowed in. So so just so you know, I know it sounds like you moved the program just so that you can actually listen to some music. Yeah, because I work every single day, Monday to Sunday. So give thanks. Walk good, as Sister Oleander said, and may the ancestors continue to guide and protect us. Ashe.
Ashe.